It's not a breakfast pizza, it's a popover, like a Yorkshire pudding. Except in the US, we call a popover that's baked in a wide pan a Dutch baby. The origin of the name is disputed. This is a savory Dutch baby that I think is really good, but first I'm going to show you the traditional sweet version. Any popover is basically just a very wet, unleavened pancake batter that steams up a ton in the oven and pops over the rim of the pan. They steam up bigger if that batter is warm before it goes in the oven, so I'm warming my refrigerated eggs for a minute in hot tap water. Works like a charm, just needs a couple of minutes. Likewise, my cold milk all warm in the microwave. The traditional ratio is 1/3 of a cup, 80 mils per egg, so I've got 2/3 of a cup here. Microwave it for like 30 seconds. You don't want it so hot that it cooks the eggs prematurely. This batter needs to be very well mixed, so people generally make it in a blender. I hate getting out my blender, so a whisk and a bowl. Crack in the eggs. Savory or sweet, I'd say a big pinch of salt per egg. I'm doing half a teaspoon of my kosher salt, a 1/4 teaspoon per egg. Maybe a teaspoon of sugar per egg, which is very little. We'll be putting sugar on top later. And purely for the sweet recipe, I'll do a glug of vanilla. Beat that until the eggs are really loose and frothy, kind of like that. For flour, the traditional ratio is also 1/3 of a cup per egg, 40 grams of flour per egg. However, I have found that I get a much nicer texture if I replace up to half of my flour with starch. Cornstarch, any starch. This probably makes the final product a little less poofy, but it makes it more tender and nicer to actually eat, in my opinion. I like to whisk that in before I whisk in my milk. When it's nice and thick like that, it's easier to whisk out the lumps. Now the milk, I'll gradually whisk in. You get a bigger rise and a smoother surface if you really mix this batter thoroughly, which is why people use the blender. It's very similar to crepe batter, and like crepes, you want to let the batter sit for at least 20 minutes. Let the particles hydrate, let the proteins autolyse, and the batter will be much more elastic and able to blow up like a balloon. Now is when I will put my pan into the oven and get the oven heating to 425 Fahrenheit, 220 C. You could heat the pan on the stove instead, but this is more efficient. When it's really hot, it should melt butter enthusiastically, like that. This is traditionally done in cast iron, but I find I can get away with less butter in a nonstick. Get that batter in before the butter burns, and say that 3 times fast. The batter should look watery. Water equals steam. This is a 10-inch diameter pan, 25 centimeters. You could do a 3-egg popover in a pan this size, maybe 4, but I prefer a thinner product. Close the oven and try not to open it until everything is puffy and golden brown. That took about 20 minutes. You want to keep the heat and the steam in there, or the baby will collapse, and collapse it shall when you take it out. No matter what you do, the steam will subside, the pancake will deflate. So now is when you want to document this for the gram, which we all know is what cooking is really about. Since we did this in a nonstick, I should be able to just lift it, and bam! Thank you, new and improved nonstick pan from Misen, sponsor of this video. Misen makes inexplicably high-quality cookware for the budget prices they charge, and this nonstick is no exception. It has a 3-layer DuPont Platinum coating, which is their most scratch-resistant coating, 2.5 times more nonstick than other pans that cost twice as much. There's also a plasma primer layer underneath to keep the coating in place. This should last a very long time. Even if you use it in the oven, the handle is oven-safe. And like all Misen pans, it feels really comfortable and solid in the hand, which I think is really important. I think we reach for the tools that feel good to hold. Follow my link in the description and use promo code AdamRagusia for 20% off your first order on this pan or anything. They got a ton of great pans. Hit my link, use code AdamRagusia, all one word. You'll save 20%. Thank you, Misen. I suggest pulling this out to a cooling rack so the bottom doesn't get soggy, and a traditional way to top a sweet Dutch baby is with a squeeze or two of lemon and then a lot of sugar. And you could just tear at it to eat it, or you could be civilized and cut it into wedges. People top these with all kinds of things, whipped cream, fruit, whatever you want. Those are cherries. And the pancake itself is crispy on the outside and kind of custardy on the inside. It'll be more custardy if you do a thicker one. Honestly, Dutch babies are a little bland and kind of chewy for my taste. I kind of think they only exist for Instagram. So, with the savory recipe, I set out to make a Dutch baby that I would actually want to eat. 2 eggs, a big pinch of salt per egg, a teaspoon of sugar per egg. Even for for the savory recipe. That's not enough to turn this into dessert. It just kind of makes the taste come alive. No vanilla this time. Whisk until frothy, 1/3 cup, 40 grams of flour per egg. Again, I'm replacing almost half of my flour with cornstarch to tenderize the final product. Whisk until smooth and then slowly whisk in warm milk, 1/3 cup, 80 mils per egg. And then something that really improves the flavor is a spoonful of any soft spreadable cheese. I'm using ricotta, but I bet you could use brie or mascarpone. This would be good in the sweet recipe as well. The baby won't puff up quite as much with cheese in it, but again, it's going to collapse no matter what you do before you actually eat it, and I'm trying to cook for the plate, not for the gram. Nice and smooth, and let that sit for at least 20 minutes. Some people let the batter sit overnight. Oven, again, at 220 Celsius, 425 Fahrenheit. Heat the pan with the oven. Melt in a good layer of butter and pour in the batter right away. We got to get this boiling on the inside before the outside is set and can no longer expand. If the thing doesn't expand at all in the oven, it's going to be gummy on the inside. While I wait, I'm going to prepare some savory toppings. I've got 1 green onion, which I will slice at an extreme angle. Lots of things taste oniony, but green onion pulls double duty as a garnish. It's crunchy and green and pretty. I'm going to bake a couple of eggs on top, and I'm going to crack them in advance and even season them in advance. This way I can just slide them on top when it's time. That's harissa powder, by the way, fantastic with eggs. And I've got a couple of slices of fancy salami, but you could use all kinds of things. Anything that works as a pizza topping will work here. Wait until the baby is basically done. It needs time to puff up before we weigh it down in the middle. Maybe pull it when it's a hair underdone. And real quickly, before it cools down too much, I'll slide on my eggs, scatter on my onions, and then tear on my salami. I can put a strip straight down the middle to keep the eggs separate. Back in the oven for maybe 5 minutes until the eggs are done to your liking. You can just poke them to assess how firm they are, but keep in mind they'll keep cooking a little as this cools. Again, I can lift this right out to a rack. If you're using a cast iron pan, just melt some extra butter onto the bottom and you should be fine. Once the bottom has steamed out more or less, I'll cut this up, and I don't want to break the egg yet, so I'll cut 1 giant slice and then serve a second smaller slice on the side for dipping. That's really quite a bit easier than breakfast pizza, and good enough to actually eat, unlike most Dutch babies. Dutch in this context is probably an anglicization of Deutsch, by the way, so it's the Germans who should be offended, if anyone.